Dear church, let's continue our series on the Hall of Flaw by talking about Noah. Hello and welcome to the Dear Church podcast. In the history of the Kansas University basketball program, there has only been one head coach with a losing record. Any ideas who that might be? I can't hear your responses, but if you said James Naismith, give yourself a gold star because that is absolutely correct. However, most people don't know that James Naismith was a basketball coach with a losing record at one of the most storied programs in college basketball. No, most people know James Naismith for something else. Anyone know what Mr. Naismith was most noted for? If you said the inventor of basketball, then give yourself another gold star. He is a member of the Basketball Hall of Fame, the College Basketball Hall of Fame, the Canadian Basketball Hall of Fame, along with numerous other halls of fame. The university where he coached, the one where he amassed a losing record, has even named their court after him. Isn't that interesting? That the inventor of the game of basketball actually had a losing record as a basketball coach. Over the last few weeks, we've been discussing how a moment doesn't make us, by looking at some of the individuals listed in what is often referred to as the Faith Hall of Fame in Hebrews chapter 11. We could flip the script on just about every one of those characters that are listed there, and rather than highlighting their faith, we could highlight a major flaw in their lives. But the Holy Spirit-inspired writer of Hebrews didn't do that. He didn't do that because that wasn't the most notable thing about these folks. What mattered most was their faith, a faith that overcame those flaws and made them useful, though flawed. So the purpose of this series has been to highlight for us the fact that it's not how far you fall, it's how high you bounce. Failure is in your forecast. It's going to happen. However, failure doesn't have to be fatal. It's all about falling forward. And that's what these Hall of Famers teach us, really. Let's look at Noah. In Hebrews chapter 11, verse 7, it says, "By faith, Noah, being warned by God about things not yet seen, in reverence prepared an ark for the salvation of his household, by which he condemned the world and became an heir of the righteousness which is according to faith." If you've ever watched the induction ceremony for the Pro Football Hall of Fame, you've noticed that each inductee has someone special from their life give a speech to introduce them. It may be a coach from his past, a son or a daughter, or even a former teammate. Whoever it is, they always tell stories about the player. They talk about their accomplishments, their character. Many times, they share not so flattering stories, but sort of like at funerals, those stories come off as humorous and glossed over as no big deal, even if they're quite, impure and unwholesome. They're all just a part of what made the player great. I'm not in total agreement with that, obviously, but it is interesting how we can easily whitewash the negative in favor of the positive. Some things are not worth celebrating. They're just not. They are forgettable moments that should never be repeated. But it is true that they are a part of a person's makeup. For better or for worse, we are all a product of our decisions. And that's what I really like about Scripture. It doesn't attempt to gloss over the negative. It exposes it. Not in an effort to celebrate it, but to show that these less than stellar moments don't define a person of faith. If I'm introducing Noah for the induction into the Faith Hall of Fame, I'm starting with this. Genesis 6, verses 8 and following. "But Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. These are the generations of Noah. Noah was a righteous man, blameless in his generation. Noah walked with God, and Noah had 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth." Noah was righteous and blameless. He stuck out like a sore thumb in an environment that was purely wicked. Like his great-grandfather Enoch, Noah walked with God. In verse 22 of Genesis chapter 6, it states, "Thus Noah did according to all that God had commanded him, so he did." In a world that followed sin, Noah followed God, and it made all the difference. What if Noah had believed in God, but never gathered wood or never swung a hammer? What if Noah did, just not exactly the way God had commanded him? I think we can safely say that he would have been numbered with the lifeless bodies floating on the surface of the water. But that wasn't Noah. Noah did as God commanded, and it made all the difference. So the question becomes, are you Noah? We often look at characters in Scripture with appreciation and admiration, but we don't often examine them with application in mind. We should say to ourselves, I want to be a Noah. As you ponder what it means to be a Noah, think about this. What are you doing for the Lord? It really doesn't matter how much Bible you know. I hear people say so-and-so knows the Bible like the back of his hand. He can quote large portions of the Bible. Okay, so what? Is he living it? Does that knowledge translate into action? Because it's not what you know, it's what you do with what you know. You believe in God? Great, even the devil believes in God. What should set the two of you apart is that you do the will of God. Noah walked with God, and it made all the difference. One of the things that often gets overlooked in the life of Noah is that he was a preacher. 2 Peter chapter 2, verses 4 and 5 reads, "For if God did not spare angels when they sinned, but cast them into hell and committed them to chains of gloomy darkness to be kept until the judgment, if he did not spare the ancient world, but preserved Noah, a herald of righteousness, with 7 others, when he brought up a flood upon the world of the ungodly." Noah was a herald of righteousness, a preacher. And if we're being honest, probably the worst preacher that has ever lived. I mean, he was definitely one of the most unsuccessful. You think about it, he spent 100 years preaching and converted no one. Actually, that's not entirely true, is it? He converted his family. And that's where Noah deserves a lot of credit. At least he got his family on the boat. I mean, where does the Great Commission begin? At home, right? Noah may have failed miserably in terms of converting others, but he took care of his primary responsibility. He would have been hard-pressed to find a preaching job in this day and age because we're so results-oriented and numbers-driven. Very few churches would want a guy who hadn't converted anyone in 100 years. We want guys who will grow our churches as if the preacher grows the church anyway. We want a preacher who will bring in a crowd. We want a guy who will do the evangelizing for us so the rest of us can do nothing. And if he fails, well, we'll fire him and get somebody else. At least that's how some churches work today. Noah wouldn't have been a good hire in this day and age, but he followed the Lord faithfully. He did the work. He got his family on the boat. And in the end, that's what truly mattered. You know, I've often propped up Noah as my example for ministry. And here's why. I have known many preachers who dedicated their entire lives to preaching and teaching the gospel. They were gone every night of the week, conducting Bible studies. They spent their days meeting the needs of the church family. They spent hours on end studying and prepping for sermons, and they did it all at the expense of their family. Their kids grew up with a father who was barely present. Their marriage was more of a partnership than a godly union. But hey, they were doing the Lord's work. And one thing I know about the church, there's always work to do. There's always people who will let you do it. But there's not a more important accomplishment in life than to get your family on the boat. Nothing is more important than that. The life of a preacher is the best life there is, in my opinion. It is so rewarding and so fulfilling, but your church family will never be as important or more important than the family that God has given you to raise. You know, many of our homes are like that TV show, Deadliest Catch. You ever see that show? It's where they fish for crab out on the Bering Sea and they die. I mean, it's extremely dangerous. These people put their lives on the line in search for the big haul of crab that will pay them thousands of dollars. And if you're like me, I watch that show and I think it's hardly worth it. These people risking their lives so that you can eat that crab or those crab legs at Red Lobster. The boat is bobbing up and down and side to side. It's taking on water. Crew members are sliding across the deck as torrents of water just pummel them. And through it all, they just keep working. They keep the course. They keep picking up the crab pots and unloading the crab. No matter how treacherous the conditions, they just keep doing their job. And I think that's it. That's how the Christian home should be. You know, the waves are treacherous. Sometimes the storm is raging. Boats are capsizing. And here we are, a family in our own little boat, navigating these waters, trying to stay afloat. Is that all the family is supposed to be? Is that our only duty, to simply ride it out until the storm passes and the waters subside? No, that's not all. The boat is bobbing up and down and side to side, taking on water. Family members are sliding across the deck as torrents of water pummel them. And through it all, we just keep working. We keep the course. We keep rescuing those who are reaching out for a lifeline. No matter how treacherous the conditions, we just keep doing our job. You see, the goal is not just to get our family on the boat and to make it through the stormy seas. The goal is to get as many people on the boat as possible. That was Noah's goal. That was God's goal. But the people of Noah's day didn't want to come aboard. And we may have the same result, but that doesn't mean that we ignore those who have been thrown overboard. We cannot stay locked down in the hull of our ship while others are struggling to stay afloat. Can you imagine being Noah and looking out from the deck of the ark and knowing that among the lifeless bodies floating in the water was one of your sons or daughters? I mean, as difficult as it would have been for Noah, that whole ordeal, I imagine that it was made a whole lot easier knowing that his children were safe on the boat. Again, the world will always be the world. Noah couldn't change that. We may not be able to change that. This world is full of turmoil. But what we can do and what we must do is navigate the raging sea. Like those crab boats on Deadliest Catch, we may take on water, we may risk life and limb, but we've got to stay the course. We've got to keep doing our job, sailing in the proper direction and toward the proper destination. So if I'm introducing Noah for induction into the Faith Hall of Fame, that's what I'm focusing on. The fact that he got his family on the boat. He was a man of faith when being a man of faith was extremely difficult, and his family were the biggest beneficiaries. And Noah's influence shows up in one of his greatest moments of weakness. Genesis chapter 9, verses 20 through 23 reads, "Then Noah began farming and planted a vineyard. He drank of the wine and became drunk and uncovered himself inside his tent. Ham, the father of Canaan, saw the nakedness of his father and told his two brothers outside. But Shem and Japheth took a garment and laid it upon both their shoulders, and walked backward and covered the nakedness of their father, and their faces were turned away, so that they did not see their father's nakedness." You know, if I were one of those people delivering the introductory speech for a Pro Football Hall of Famer, I might tell this story in a comedic light and get plenty of laughs. You know, a guy walks in on a man who is lying on the floor, drunk, unclothed, and passed out. I mean, it sounds like something you might find in a college dorm setting, right? If this situation occurred in a college dorm room, you would expect the guy to go and get his friends, maybe write something on the guy's forehead or put shaving cream in the guy's hand and then tickle his nose. But in the biblical story, Noah is passed out drunk, and two of his sons react in a way that seems indicative of their upbringing. Shem and Japheth take a garment and they cover up their father's nakedness. Not only that, but they walk in backwards so that they would not see their father in the nude. And the rest of the account of Genesis 9 reads like this, starting in verse 24. "When Noah awoke from his wine, he knew what his youngest son had done to him. So he said, 'Cursed be Canaan, a servant of servants. He shall be to his brothers.' He also said, 'Blessed be the Lord, the God of Shem, and let Canaan be his servant. May God enlarge Japheth, and let him dwell in the tents of Shem, and let Canaan be his servant.'" Now, we really don't have time to get into all the theories as to why Ham, the other son, I should say it this way, what Ham, the other son, actually did to warrant a curse for Canaan. That gets rather involved. Some say that when he went to tell his brothers, he said too much. Others think that maybe he mocked and ridiculed his father to his brothers. Some even suggest that seeing the nakedness of another means to have sex with that person. They reference Leviticus chapter 20 and verse 17 in that case. Again, we don't have time to get into all of that, and that's really not pertinent to what we're discussing. I simply want you to notice the actions of Shem and Japheth, two men who illustrate for us a love that protects. In Noah's failure, his sons succeed. I mean, it had to be difficult to face his sons the next morning. Wonder what that conversation was like, don't you? I would think it went something like, "I'm sorry, boys. I messed up, but I am proud of you." And I've been there, haven't you? I've never been drunk in front of my kids, but I've certainly messed up in their presence. I've been in a few situations where the only thing I could say was, "Sorry, don't be like me." And there have been times when I've watched my kids make the exact same mistakes that I did. That really stings. But there have also been times when I've seen my children outdo their earthly father. That's a glorious feeling. When we build an ark on faith, it can have lasting ramifications. And that's what we would wish for our children, isn't it? That they take the faith that has been handed down and grow it. When my kids were little, they would say something like, "Daddy, I want to be like you when I grow up." And that always made me feel good. I would lovingly tell them, "Don't be like me. Be better than me. Be like Jesus." Because that's the ultimate goal. As we close, I want us to look at Genesis chapter 6, verse 17, which reads, "For behold, I will bring a flood of waters upon the earth to destroy all flesh, in which is the breath of life under heaven. Everything that is on the earth shall die." So we're kind of exiting off the interstate a little bit and taking a little side road here, but there is a gruesome reality to this story that is often lost because we treat Noah and the ark as a children's story. And we picture happy animals sticking their heads out the windows, giraffes with their long necks popping their heads through the top of the ark, a rainbow illuminating the blue sky. We sing the happy song, Who Built the Ark? But what if? What if churches were to paint murals in their nurseries that were a little truer to the story and the circumstances surrounding Noah? What if the mural depicted what God wanted us to get? Imagine being Noah. Again, imagine looking out from the deck of the ark and seeing nothing but lifeless bodies floating in the water. Imagine the stench of death and decay. Imagine that scene painted on the wall of a nursery. That's not a pretty picture. It's not a picture of happy animals and blue skies and rainbows. It's a picture of the wrath of God punishing a sinful world. Notice Genesis 7, verses 11 and 12. It says, in the 600th year of Noah's life, in the second month, on the 17th day of the month, all that day, all the fountains of the great deep burst forth, and the windows of heavens were opened, and rain fell upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights. You ever wonder why God chose to include the year, the month, and the day? Well, what do you think of when you hear 9/11? What comes to mind when you hear December 7th, 1941, or June 6th, 1944? These are dates that we don't easily forget. They're etched in our minds. In fact, many of you know where you were when you heard the news on 9/11. Some of you may even remember the day that will live in infamy. God wanted the people to remember this date. The 17th day of the second month of the 600th year was a day that would live in infamy. It's a day that would not soon be forgotten because it was a day that literally changed the world. You want to be a Noah? Well, then work at changing your own little part of the world. Start with getting your family on the boat. Remember these words from Matthew chapter 24. But about that day and hour no one knows, not even the angels of heaven, nor the Son, but the Father alone. For the coming of the Son of Man will be just like the days of Noah. For as in those days before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage until the day that Noah entered the ark, and they did not understand until the flood came and took them all away. So will the coming of the Son of Man be. Your ark is Jesus Christ. He is the ark of our salvation. And if we want to go to heaven, we got to be on the ark. It's just that simple. As your friend, maybe as a preacher, I'm pleading with you to get on board. For those that are already on board, then help me with this great rescue mission. Like Noah, we're building something great here. God is building something great and using us. We need all the help that we can get. Hey, thank you so much for tuning in. Share the word about the podcast. Remember, Apple Podcasts, iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, Facebook, all those platforms. Let people know about us. And also, if you have questions, feel free to email me at chris.mccurley@rippleoflight.com. Thank you so much for tuning in. Again, we hope to be up and running in Dixon, Tennessee before too long. Until then, I hope you'll bear with us in this format. I love you. Thank you all. Sincerely, Chris.